Fossils are considered as an exciting world, a story told by rocks that tell us about the deep past millions of years ago, even before the creation of man on Earth. And we will look at the concept of fossils, the types of fossils and their formation, and the importance of fossils. Fossils, they are the remnant of old living organisms that are preserved in sedimentary rocks, and they can be remains, and remains are traces that indicate the remains of an old living organism after death. So remain fossils like teeth and bones, or they can be a trace, and trace fossil, they are traces of an old living organism indicate its activity during its life, like the footprint or the worm pores. So if any fossil that indicate what the animals were doing in their life called a trace fossils. What are the type of fossils and how they form? So fossils classified according to the way of formation into fossil of complete body, mold, cast, and the petrified fossil. The science study the fossils are called paleontology. So the fossil of complete body is the type of fossil which was formed as a result of the rapid pairing of an organism as soon as it died in a medium preserved from decomposition as snow and amber. And the complete body fossil keeps the whole shape and details of the body. We have two examples, like the mammoth fossils. And a mammoth is a type of elephant lived in Siberia and was extinct 25,000 years ago. And the first complete mammoth we found in the last century kept the whole shape, hair, flesh, and even the food in its stomach. And when the mammoth died, the one that formed the complete body fossils died and rapidly buried in snow, so the snow preserved them from decomposition. Second example is amber fossils. And in old geological time, there were a common pine tree secretes a resinous matter that covers the insect, and as soon as the resinous exposed to air, they solidify and preserve the amber, the insect, from decomposition, forming the complete fossils. And if you watch the Jurassic Park movie, you know that the scientists extracted the DNA of the dinosaurs from a drop of blood was inside in a mosquito insect preserved in amber. So here is the pine tree secreting the resinous matter and trapping the insect inside, and then solidified, and by passing time, millions of years, the amber preserved and saved the insect inside it. Then we have the mold, and the mold is the replica of the internal details of the structure of an old organism after its death and buried in a sedimentary rock, like ammonite fossils, neolite fossils, and terpolite fossils. So how the ammonite mold form? So first, when a snail die, it falls to the sea floor, where the soft part of its body decomposes, leaving the shell buried in sediment. And the sediment fill up the shell inside the cavity, goes inside the cavity and fill them as time passes. So then the shell decomposes completely, leaving the solid rock carrying the internal details of the snail.
does an ammonite become fossilized? Well, around 150 to 200 million years ago, in the Jurassic period when dinosaurs roamed the Earth, these shelled, squid-like creatures were plentiful in oceans. For some reason, this particular ammonite died. Its shell ended up on the seabed, and the soft, squishy parts of the ammonite were either eaten or they broke down over time. The shell was then covered in silt or sand, which protected it from damage, and over time, gradually, the ammonite shell was buried. After thousands of years, many layers of sand covered the shell, and gradually that sand became sandy rock. The shell survives, but the wide spaces inside the shell are filled with water that seeps in through the rock. The water carries dissolved minerals. As the years passed, indeed as millions of years passed, the depth of the ocean gradually reduced, until eventually the area in which the shell was originally buried was on dry land. The minerals form crystals, which are a kind of hard rock inside the shell. Over time, the rock around the fossil, made of the sand or silt, eroded as a result of wind or rain, until the hard rock of the fossil is left uncovered and exposed, all ready to be found by a paleontologist like this one.
So, third type is a cast, and the cast is a replica for the external detail of the structure of an old living organism after its death and buried in sedimentary rock. So, cast, external details, mold, internal details. Cast like the furnace cast or the fish cast. And notice that in the sedimentary rock, mold or cast can be formed for an old living organism. So you can find mold or cast for the same living organism.
Sat within some soft shale, this rock was easily removed. All of the shale crumbled away, and we immediately saw evidence of an ammonite preserved within, so let's open it. After a few taps with the hammer and chisel, we revealed it. Looking inside, this Jurassic ammonite is perfectly preserved. Look at the quality of that shell. Millions, in fact hundreds of millions of years old. What a superb find.
Then the petrified fossils. Petrified fossils are the fossils in which minerals replace the organic matter of the dead living organism and keeping the shape without any change. Like the tooth, the egg fossil of dinosaurs, and the petrified wood. So how the formation of the petrified wood happen? First, we have a stem trunk of a trees that are more than 35 million years buried in a certain environmental condition, and the silica, which is the mineral, replace the organic matter of the wood in a process called petrification. So petrification process, it's the process in which the minerals replace the organic materials. And by passing time, the wood change into rocks which carry the same details of wood without change. So why the petrified wood look like rocks and we consider them as fossils? Because they give us the details about the life of an old plant. So as we mentioned, the petrified fossil keep the shape of the body, so they keep the rings of the tree. And from the rings of the tree, we can know that the age of the tree and the environmental condition in which the tree lived.
Check out this beautiful petrified wood. Wow. That is just gorgeous. Here's another piece I found just a second before that.
And I reckon there's more where that came from.
So what are the suitable conditions for fossil formation? First, presence of a hard skeleton. The organism must have a hard skeleton, a shell, a bone, or wood. And the organism must be buried immediately in a medium that preserves it from decomposition. Thirdly, the existence of a suitable medium in which the materials replace the organic material of a living organism. The importance of fossils. So why the fossils are important? Because they help us in age determination of sedimentary rocks. They help us figuring out the paleo environment. They help in studying evolution. And finally, help in petroleum exploration. So first, age determination of sedimentary rock. We determine the age of a sedimentary rock by what we call an index fossil, which are fossils of organisms that lived for a short period of time but had a wide geographic distribution. So the index fossil, they are fossils of organisms lived for a short period, but they were nearly lived everywhere. Like two famous examples of index fossils, the ammonite fossils and tribolite fossils, because those creatures really nearly lived everywhere in oceans back in time. And scientists notice that the lower layers of sedimentary rock have fossils older than fossils of the upper layer. So as we go up, the fossils and the age of the rocks are newer. So this is the older layer, newer layer, and this is the most recent. Second, figuring out the paleo environment. So paleo environment means the environment of ancient times. So fossils give us an idea about the environment in which they lived in during the old geologic time. So paleo environment means old time environment. Paleo means old, environment. So for example, the Nimulite fossil they found in limestone in El Muqattam mountain, and they indicate that the El Muqattam mountain was a sea floor more than 35 million years ago. So whenever we find a Nimulite fossil, we know that this place for a sea floor. The furnace fossil, they indicate that the environment was a tropical environment, because furnace grow in tropical environment. So whenever we found a furnace fossil, we know that this place was a tropical environment. And the current fossils, they indicate that the environment was a warm, shallow sea. Then they help us in studying life evolution. And we know the evolution from the fossil record, which are the sequence of fossil in sedimentary rock, according to their sequence of appearance from simple to complicated. So fossils in sedimentary rock, as we mentioned, the down layers, they are much old and much simple, and as we go up, the fossils became newer and more complicated organisms. And from studying fossils, we showed that, we know that life started in sea and then established on land, and the organism always developed from simple to complicated. So for example, in the plant world, the algae came before mosses and ferns, and gymnosperm appeared before angiosperm. And in animal world, first we have the invertebrate, followed by fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and finally birds and mammals. So this is a famous fossils for dinosaurs called Archaeopteryx, and it's considered a link between reptiles and bird. So why we consider it a link between reptiles and bird? It's reptiles because it have teeth and scales, and those are features for reptiles, and it has feathers. And if you look into the bones of the torso, they are compacted like the today's bird bones, so that's why we think they are a link between reptiles and birds, because they combine some features of birds and features of reptiles. And finally, petroleum exploration. When we search for petroleum, we take a sample of the sand and examine it, looking for two fossils, foraminifera and radiolaria. Those are the foraminifera and radiolaria, and they help us in determining the age of the rocks, and they indicate that this place is a suitable condition for petroleum formation.
Like buried treasure, they lie hidden from sight. Echoes of an ancient past, they whisper secrets and tell tales once lost to time. Fossils are remnants or impressions of ancient organisms that are naturally preserved in stone. While there are hundreds of fossil types, they are often grouped into two major categories: body fossils, which are the preserved remains of plants and animals, and trace fossils, which are records of an animal's behavior, such as footprints. Together, they form the fossil record, a primary account that tells the story of life on Earth through stone. Fossilization, or the process of preserving organisms in stone, can occur in countless ways. These methods are largely grouped depending on whether the organisms are altered during the fossilization process. Fossilization that does not alter a specimen can help to preserve its original form and texture. Among many methods, this group includes organisms that have been frozen, preserved in tar pits, and mummified. One special case involves trapping organisms, oftentimes insects, in amber. This process begins when an organism is covered in tree sap. The sap, or resin, forms a protective seal around the entrapped organism. Over time, the soft resin hardens and turns into amber, with the organism suspended within. This process creates a biologically inert tomb for the organism, allowing its soft tissues to be remarkably preserved. Other fossilization methods change the specimen as it is being preserved. For instance, carbonization transforms soft tissues into thin black films of carbon. In fact, countless layers of carbonized plant material create a well-known fossil fuel, coal. But one of the most common types of fossilization that changes a specimen is called permineralization. Permineralization begins when minerals from water or the ground enter the pores of dead plant or animal material. Over time, the minerals attach themselves, clinging onto cellular walls and building a crystalline network.